Clara stormed out of Gunner's room, her boots pounding against the floor of the sanctuary with a relentless rhythm. She was still burning with the frustration of her earlier encounter with Gunner. How could he shut her out like that? How could he act like he was the only one who had suffered, the only one who had something to lose? But now was not the time to dwell on that. There was still too much they didn't know, too many unanswered questions about what had really happened in Ultranacious realm. Clara needed answers, and there was only one person who could provide them: Lysandra Diabolosa. She found Lysandra sitting quietly at the edge of the sanctuary, her form silhouetted against the soft glow of Alfheim's endless twilight. The elven princess seemed lost in thought, her hands resting on her lap as she stared out at the horizon. Clara took a deep breath, trying to temper the storm of emotions that still raged inside her, and approached. "Lysandra," Clara said, her voice sharp but controlled. "We need to talk." Lysandra turned her head slowly, her expression unreadable, as she regarded Clara. For a moment, the two women simply stared at each other, neither of them speaking. Clara could sense the weight of the unspoken history between them, the complicated alliance that had been forged in the fires of battle but was still tinged with mistrust. "What is it you wish to know?" Lysandra asked, her voice calm and measured. Clara crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I need to know what happened. What really happened when Gunner faced your father." Lysandra sighed softly, her gaze dropping to the ground. For a moment, Clara thought she might refuse to answer, but then the elven princess nodded slowly and gestured for her to sit beside her. Clara hesitated, still feeling the tension between them, but then she sat, keeping her posture rigid. Lysandra was quiet for a long time before she finally spoke. "It was more than I expected," Lysandra began, her voice quiet. "When Gunner arrived in my father's realm, I could feel the weight of his purpose, the sheer force of his determination to end my father once and for all, but he wasn't prepared for what he would face." Clara's jaw tightened. "And you? What were you doing during all this?" Lysandra's eyes flickered with something, guilt perhaps, but she quickly composed herself. "I fought alongside him. At first. But my father, he is a creature of darkness unlike anything Gunner or I had ever faced. His power was overwhelming and I failed." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Failed how?" Lysandra looked away, her voice thick with regret. "My father, he used his dark magic to restrain me, to try and turn me back to his side. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't help Gunner when he needed me most." Clara could feel her frustration bubbling to the surface again. "So, you just let him fight alone? You let him lose his arm and his eye while you stood by?" Lysandra flinched, and Clara instantly regretted her harsh words. She knew this wasn't Lysandra's fault, at least not entirely. But she couldn't shake the anger she felt. Gunner had been through hell, and she needed to know why. "I didn't let him," Lysandra said, her voice rising slightly in defense. "I was bound by my father's magic. I fought with everything I had, but it wasn't enough. Gunner, he had to face my father alone." Clara's fists clenched at her sides. The idea of Gunner, already weakened by his injuries, facing down the Demon King without anyone at his side was more than she could bear. "What happened next?" Clara asked, her voice low and dangerous. Lysandra's expression grew darker. "My father taunted him, used his words to cut deep. He told Gunner about Trinity, about how she was alive and working with him all along. It was cruel. You could see the pain on Gunner's face, and then, in that moment of distraction, my father struck. He disarmed him, took Starbreaker from his hands." Clara felt a sharp pang of fury rise in her chest. The idea of Ultranacious toying with Gunner, playing on his emotions like that, made her blood boil. "And then," Clara prompted, her voice strained. Lysandra swallowed hard. "And then Gunner fell. His wound, he was losing so much blood. I thought it was over. But Gunnar, even after everything, he didn't give up. He played dead, waiting for the moment when my father would get close enough. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She could picture it. Gunnar, bleeding and broken, still finding a way to keep fighting. When my father came near, Lysandra continued, her voice trembling slightly, Gunnar struck. He used his silver dagger to sever my father's Achilles tendon. The Demon King fell, and Gunnar, he drove the dagger into his heart. He ended him. Clara closed her eyes, trying to process everything Lysandra had said. The image of Gunnar, wounded and alone, still finding a way to defeat Ultranacius, filled her with both pride and sorrow. But the details of the battle, Trinity's betrayal, the toll it had taken on Gunnar, were almost too much to bear. "And after that?" Clara asked quietly. Lysandra looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "After that, Gunnar collapsed. I tried to help him, but he was already fading. I used the potion he gave me to heal myself, but by the time I turned back to him, he was unconscious." Clara's heart ached at the thought of it. She had known Gunnar was strong, stronger than anyone she had ever known, but even he had limits, and it sounded like he had come dangerously close to reaching them. "I called for you," Lysandra added softly. "I used his talisman, and then the pack arrived." Clara nodded slowly, the memory of that moment fresh in her mind. She had felt the urgency in Lysandra's call, the sheer desperation in her voice. And now, hearing the full story, Clara understood why. For a long time, the two women sat in silence, the weight of the battle hanging between them. Finally, Clara spoke again, her voice quieter now. "Thank you," she said, though the words were difficult to say, "for calling us, for helping him." Lysandra nodded, her eyes flickering with a mix of emotions. "I did what I could, but Gunnar, he's the one who saved us all." Clara stood up, her mind racing with everything she had just learned. She knew now that there were no easy answers, no simple way to fix what had been broken. But one thing was clear. Gunnar had given everything to defeat Ultranacius, and now it was up to the pack to help him find his way back. Without another word, Clara turned and walked away, her steps heavy with the weight of what was to come. Clara was already halfway out of the sanctuary when a voice called after her, soft yet filled with purpose. "Clara, wait." She paused, recognizing Lysandra's voice, and turned to face her. Lysandra's expression was difficult to read, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, an uneasiness mixed with resolve. "There's something I need to tell you," Lysandra said, stepping forward and producing something from beneath her cloak. The familiar glint of silver caught Clara's eye, and her breath hitched. It was Gunnar's dagger, the one enchanted with the starlight gem, the one he had used to strike down Ultranacius. Lysandra held it carefully in her hand, the blade gleaming faintly in the light. "I found this in the remains," Lysandra explained, her voice softer now. "It was buried in the ash that was once my father. I thought maybe Gunnar would want it back." Clara's eyes narrowed, tension flickering in her chest. That dagger was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of Gunnar's strength, his resilience, and his unbreakable bond with the pack. And now Lysandra, daughter of the very creature who had tried to destroy them, stood before her, offering it back. Lysandra noticed the hesitation in Clara's eyes and spoke quickly. "I only want to return it. To him. In person. I wouldn't take it from him otherwise." Clara studied her for a long moment, weighing the sincerity in her voice. Finally, she nodded. "He's in the sanctuary. Come with me." As they walked in silence, the weight of the dagger between them, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. What would Gunnar say when he saw it? Would he want it back? Or would it be a reminder of the pain he was trying so desperately to bury? When they reached Gunner's bedside, Eli and Jewel were still there, watching over him like silent sentinels. Gunner's eye fluttered open as Clara approached, and she gave him a reassuring nod. "Lysandra found something," Clara said softly, stepping aside to reveal the elven princess holding his dagger. Lysandra stepped forward hesitantly, her gaze flickering between Gunner and the dagger in her hand. "I thought you might want this back," she said quietly, offering it to him. For a moment, Gunner said nothing, his single eye fixed on the dagger. Then, to everyone's surprise, he shook his head. "Keep it," Gunner said, his voice rough but steady. Lysandra blinked in surprise. "What? No, I couldn't. This belongs to you." "It did," Gunner corrected, his gaze locking with hers. "But now, it's yours." Before Lysandra could protest further, Gunner reached out weakly, his hand brushing over the hilt of the dagger. A soft glow emanated from the blade as the enchantment that bound the weapon to him faded. The starlight gem pulsed softly before the magic settled, and when Gunner removed his hand, the dagger remained in Lysandra's grip, now bound to her. "You fought alongside me," Gunner said, his voice low. "You helped end your father. You've earned the right to carry it." Lysandra stared at the dagger in her hand, the weight of his words sinking in. She looked back at Gunner, emotion flickering in her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Gunner replied, leaning back against the pillows, his energy already fading. Clara stepped forward, her expression serious. "That dagger isn't just a weapon," she explained, her voice carrying the weight of history. "It's a part of our pack's legacy. Gunner forged it with Eli's magic, but the bond it holds is deeper than just metal and enchantment." Lysandra listened intently, her eyes wide. "That dagger represents protection, loyalty, and sacrifice," Clara continued. "It was meant to be a tool of salvation in the darkest moments, and it carries the strength of the entire pack with it. By giving it to you, Gunner isn't just offering you a weapon, he's offering you trust, a place beside us." The significance of Clara's words wasn't lost on Lysandra. She looked down at the dagger, feeling the weight of it in her hand, not just physically but emotionally as well. It was more than just a blade now. It was a connection to the pack, to Gunner, and to the battle they had fought together. Lysandra nodded, her grip tightening on the hilt. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Clara gave her a firm nod, her expression softening slightly. "Don't take it lightly. You're one of us now." For the first time since arriving in Alfheim, Lysandra felt a sense of belonging, a fragile but undeniable bond forming between her and the pack. She knew it would take time to fully earn their trust, especially Clara's. But this was a start. With a final glance at Gunner, who had already drifted back into a fitful sleep, Lysandra tucked the dagger into her belt, the cool weight of it grounding her in this new reality. The pack had accepted her, and now she would carry their legacy forward, no matter what came next. 2 more days passed in the serene but heavy atmosphere of Alfheim. The quiet hum of the magical realm did little to ease the tension growing in the hearts of those gathered around Gunner. Though his physical wounds had begun to mend under Eli and Jewel's care, the deeper, invisible wounds, the ones that gripped his mind, remained raw and unhealed. The pack could sense it, and their concern was palpable. Clara was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "He can't stay here much longer," she said, pacing the length of the room. Her fierce brown eyes flickered between the still form of Gunner and the rest of the pack. "He needs something more than just magic. Alfheim is a place of peace, but Gunner needs to face his demons, and he can't do that here." Dezera, who sat on the edge of the bed watching over Gunner with a solemn gaze, nodded. "He needs to be in familiar territory. The workshop, Earth. Maybe being back home will help him remember who he is." Bianca, ever the maternal figure of the pack, crossed her arms and sighed. "He's never been one to heal just by resting. Gunner needs a fight, something to focus on. But here, all he's doing is drowning in memories." The wolves, Alpha, Omega, and Bravo, whined softly from their place beside Gunner's bed, as if sensing the pack's discussion. Eli, who had been by Gunner's side, constantly frowned. I've done everything I can with the magic of Alfheim, but it can only heal the physical, the mind, his spirit. That's a different battle. Just then, Lysandra entered the room, her expression tense. She looked weary, though she tried to keep her composure. Clara and the others turned to her, sensing that something was on her mind. I've just received word from home, Lysandra said quietly, her gaze falling on Gunner. My sisters need me. With my father gone, there's much to repair, monsters to control, and I'm needed there to help restore order. Clara's eyes softened slightly. Of course. You've done enough here, Lysandra. You're part of the pack now, but your people need you too. Lysandra gave a small nod, but her eyes remained on Gunner's still form. Before I go, I wanted to check on him, and to say goodbye. She stepped forward, her hand instinctively brushing the hilt of the silver dagger Gunner had given her. The weight of it on her hip had become a comfort, a reminder of the bond she had forged with Gunner and the pack. He'll recover, Clara said, though the uncertainty in her voice didn't go unnoticed. Lysandra crouched beside the bed, her sharp elven features softened with concern. I'll keep the talisman close. Call on me if you need anything, no matter how far I am. She paused, looking at Clara. He gave me the dagger, but there's something more I need to say. If he wakes, tell him I'll be waiting. If he ever needs to come to my realm, for any reason, he's welcome. Clara nodded. I'll tell him. Lysandra stood, her eyes lingering on Gunner for a moment longer before she turned to the pack. Goodbye for now. I'll return when I'm able. As Lysandra left the room, the air grew heavy again, and Clara turned her attention back to the pack. She could see the worry in their faces, feel the weight of the decision they were trying to make. We need to move him back to Earth, Dezera said, her voice steady and resolute. The workshop is where he belongs. He built that place with his own hands, and it's where he can find some sense of control again. Being in Alfheim, with all this peace, it's suffocating him. Jewel, who had been quiet up until now, nodded in agreement. He needs to face his struggles, not hide from them. We thought bringing him here would help, but maybe it's been doing the opposite. The workshop is where he started his fight against Black Dawn. It's where he can find his way back. Eli glanced at Clara, her eyes full of concern. Do you think he's ready? He's still weak. Clara sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. I don't know if he's ready, but keeping him here is only delaying what needs to happen. He needs to be surrounded by his pack, by the world he fought so hard to protect. And maybe, just maybe, that will give him the strength to start healing. Bianca, always the voice of reason, added, We'll take it one step at a time. We'll make sure he's stable before we move him, but we can't wait too long. The longer we stay here, the harder it's going to be for him to come back. The pack shared a look, the decision made between them without another word. Clara turned to Eliana Vale, who had been silently watching from the doorway. Can you open the portal to Earth? Eliana nodded, her silver eyes shimmering with understanding. Of course, I will make sure the transition is smooth, but know that this journey will be difficult for him. Healing is not always linear, and the darkness within him may take time to fully reveal itself. Clara squared her shoulders. We'll be there to help him fight it. The pack gathered around Gunner's bed, preparing for the journey ahead. The wolves, Alpha, Omega, and Bravo, stood at the ready, ever loyal to their alpha. As Eliana raised her staff and began to weave the portal, Clara placed a hand on Gunner's shoulder. Hold on, Gunner, she whispered. We're taking you home. The portal shimmered to life, its swirling light casting long shadows in Eliana Vale's sanctuary. The magic of Alfheim hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the peace this realm offered, but also the stillness that had begun to choke Gunner. For days the pack had waited patiently, watching their alpha slip further into himself, into the dark corners of his mind. But Clara was done waiting. She stood at the foot of Gunner's bed, her fierce eyes blazing with determination. The rest of the pack gathered around, their expressions a mix of concern and uncertainty. They had all discussed it, moving Gunner back to Earth, back to the workshop where he belonged. But Clara had other plans. She wasn't about to carry him through the portal. Not anymore. With her hands on her hips, Clara stared down at Gunner, her face a mask of resolve. The tension in the room was thick as a knife, and the pack could feel the shift in her demeanour. "Get up," she commanded, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Jewel, standing at Gunner's side, shot her a concerned look. "Clara, he's still weak. Maybe—" "No," Clara cut her off, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We've been coddling him long enough. He's the alpha of this pack, our leader. He's not going to heal lying in that bed, wallowing in his misery. He needs to fight, like the rest of us have been." Gunner's eye flickered open, his face pale, the exhaustion still etched deep into his features. His left arm was gone, his eye covered by a patch, and his body screamed with pain. But it was the weight in his chest, the overwhelming sense of failure and loss, that kept him anchored to that bed. Clara stepped closer, towering over him, her presence fierce and commanding. "I said, get up!" The rest of the pack exchanged uneasy glances. Bianca, always protective, spoke up. "Clara, maybe we should—" "I'm not asking!" Clara snapped, her voice as sharp as a wolf's fang. She leaned over Gunner, her dark hair brushing his shoulder. "You think you're the only one suffering? The only one carrying the weight of this war? We've all fought, Gunner. We've all bled. Dezera lost her leg and she's still standing. I've been holding this pack together while you lay here giving up." She grabbed his remaining arm, her grip firm but not unkind. "Get up, or I'll drag you through that portal myself, but you're not staying here to die." Gunner groaned, his body protesting every movement. He tried to pull away from her grasp, but Clara was relentless. She wouldn't let him sink into that darkness any further. "Clara," Eli began softly, but Clara cut her off with a sharp look. "He's stronger than this," Clara said, her voice filled with both anger and something deeper, fierce loyalty. "He's our alpha, and it's time he starts acting like it." Gunner's eye opened fully now, and he met Clara's gaze, her intensity piercing through the haze of his despair. For a long moment, he said nothing. His body was broken, his spirit shattered. But there was something in Clara's words, something in the fire of her eyes that sparked something inside him. Slowly, painfully, Gunner pushed himself up. His body protested, his limbs weak and shaking, but Clara stood firm, never letting him fall back into that bed. Her hand never left his arm, steadying him. The pack watched in silence, unsure whether to intervene or let Clara continue. Dezera, standing in the corner, nodded approvingly. She understood the demons Gunner was fighting. She had fought them too. "I know what it's like to lose," Clara said, her voice quieter now but no less fierce. "I've lost my brothers, my friends. Hell, I've nearly lost myself more times than I can count. But we don't get to give up, Gunner. Not when we have a pack counting on us. Not when there's still a fight left to win." Gunner gritted his teeth, forcing his legs to swing over the side of the bed. His vision swam, his balance unsteady, but Clara was there, steady and unwavering. "Walk through that portal, Gunner," she said, her voice commanding. "Walk back to Earth. You're not dead yet, and I won't let you give up." Bianca, though still concerned, could see the fire in Clara's eyes. She stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Gunner's shoulder. "We're with you, Gunner. We've always been with you." The wolves, Alpha, Omega, and Bravo, rose to their feet, their golden eyes never leaving Gunner as he took his first shaky step towards the portal. Jewel, ever the healer, moved to help him, but Clara shook her head. "He needs to do this himself." Gunner's breath came in ragged gasps as he forced himself forward, each step a battle against the pain and the overwhelming darkness threatening to pull him back. But Clara stayed close, her presence like a shield, ready to catch him if he faltered but refusing to let him fall. When they reached the portal, Gunner hesitated, his gaze flickering between the glowing light of Alfheim and the shadows waiting for him back on Earth. "I can't," he began, but Clara cut him off. "You can," she said, her voice fierce and unrelenting. "You're Gunner, you're the alpha of this pack, and we need you." With one final agonizing step, Gunner crossed the threshold into the portal. The light of Alfheim faded behind him, replaced by the familiar weight of Earth's gravity, the cold air of reality hitting him like a slap to the face. Clara was right beside him as they emerged on the other side, her fierce gaze locked on his. "You're back," she said, her voice softer now but still filled with that unshakable resolve. "Now let's get to work." The rest of the pack followed through the portal, gathering around Gunner. He was weak, he was broken, but he was standing, and that was enough for now. The battle was far from over, but Clara had done what needed to be done. She had pulled her alpha from the brink, and now it was up to him to find his way back. But he wouldn't have to do it alone. The pack was with him every step of the way, and together they would face whatever darkness came next.